And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 578. Ramping up for the final big weekend of draft action. Some people will be in Vegas, some people won't. Most of us will be enjoying drafting from our couches or our offices at home, whatever we prefer. But it's going to be a fun one. So we have a couple episodes coming up for you this week. Today, breaking down some AL kind of storylines or key kind of maybe draft nuggets for each team. Friday, we'll have a National League version of that coming out to get you ready for the big weekend. In order to help break down the American League for me, it's fun. There's a lot of interesting things putting this outline together. I got the On the Wire crew. And if you don't know what the On the Wire crew is, one of the best podcasts in baseball. I've been on the show twice now. It's been awesome. It's over on the PitcherList podcast network. And there's two wonderful gentlemen that are on the On the Wire crew. We have Mr. Kevin Hasting. You can find him on Twitter at Hasting Kevin. How we doing, my friend?
Excellent. Thank you, Bubba. It's great to be here. Always a blast hanging out with you and talking baseball.
Most definitely. And then his co-host, you can find him on the Twitter at 80 grade, Mr. Adam Howe. How we doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's been a long time since I get a lot of how are you doing? I know you didn't do that on purpose, but I've been getting that since freshman year of high school. So it's nice to hear it again.
It's okay. I am a very sarcastic person, and honestly, I was doing different things, kind of getting ready for the show, and I'm like, I said that out loud in my head for some reason. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. This is dumb dad joke humor that I live for. This is like the epitome of what annoys half my friends and stuff like that. So
it's perfect.
Yeah, I'm with you. But how are you guys doing draft season? Like we kind of talked about it off the air. We'll give the listeners a little behind the scenes. We'll go with you, Adam, and then Kevin, and then also plug your guys' stuff at PitcherList. I know things are busy. Everything's been going full go for you guys. You guys don't stop. You're like me. You guys are one of the few that just don't stop, which is a great thing. But go ahead and plug away. And how's that draft season?
Yeah, we didn't. Not only did we not stop, we actually ramped up in the off season because as Kevin had the idea, we wanted to make sure we got to our 100th episode of On the Wire just in time for PitchCon. And we had to add a couple episodes here or there and go a little bit more than weekly to do that. So we were able to do that. And I mean, On the Wire has been awesome. And we're going to be continuously doing our show weekly on Sundays as we focus on fab recommendations throughout the course of the season. But yeah, I mean, we're in the PitcherList Discord all the time. Bubba, you just announced as well. You're in there as well now as the future host of the First Pitch podcast during the week, the weekday edition, if you will. So that'll be great. But really just enjoying all the new tools that Nick has put out there between PLV and PL Pro and all the projections and the auction calculator. I've been able to use those as we talked about earlier. I'm pretty sure I'm done with drafts for this season. I have like a supplemental dynasty draft coming up next weekend. But talking to you guys, there's always a chance they jump in something else at the last possible second. But I've got 15 NFBC drafts under my belt for the season, mix and match of gladiators, DCs, 50s. Obviously I'm not in all 10, but we had 10 listener leagues for On the Wire as well. Those are 12 teamers on NFBC, so same as the online championship format. And those have been a blast. Those are all concluded. We doubled our leagues from last year, so that was really cool. But it'll be interesting. I haven't yet done it, but I got to go back and look at ADP from our November draft all the way up to our early March drafts and kind of compare and contrast. I know what'll come up next weekend on next week's show as we talk about who's available for the first week of Fab. But it's been fun kind of seeing the ebb and flow of how drafts have gone from November all the way to March.
Most definitely. And yeah, the first Fab period is this weekend, which is
right,
nuts. And those of us that draft early, the wire is going to be awesome. It's going to be like a kid in a candy store in some of those leagues. So, Kevin, how are things going for you, my friend?
Going outstanding, Bubba. Thank you again. I have, I think, a little more than half the number of leagues that I drafted last year. I think last year I ended up with 26 of the different various leagues. This year I'm at 14, and I could be done, but as we were talking off air, those first couple of days, we're recording here and we have 8 days till opening day. Absolutely amazing. This is a big draft weekend for a lot of people out in Las Vegas, as you mentioned. And I'm not going to be able to attend this year, but then that leaves Monday through Thursday. And I'm fairly certain I'll end up getting the itch and hopping in something prior to Thursday. And yeah, it's just been an absolute blast. And Adam mentioned our listener leagues. I believe I'm in 6 of the 10. So I'm at 8 fab leagues right now, which is a little less than I had last year. So that'll help with the time and the new tools they gave us on NFBC. That's going to be huge this season. I've been playing since we started drafting our listener leagues early in the off season. We had fab leagues in the system when, before OCs were being drafted and stuff. So we got to play around with the new tools a little bit if we wanted to. It's amazing. That's going to save us a lot of time this season.
Yeah, it's going to be like even last year's developments were huge. This one's going to be even bigger. I think I'm in 6 or 7 fab leagues. I was just scrolling around. If I stop with what I have signed up, that's a big if. I'm like you, Kevin. Like I just, if I'm bored, if I get another rainstorm next week in California and I'm sitting at home all day, like there's a great chance I might get my arm twisted. It just, it's the best time of the year. The only thing that's been better is seeing Mike Trout versus Shohei Ohtani on Tuesday night. That was electric, and I'm apologizing ahead of time. This show will not be as good as that. It's not against my co-host. Not against my co-host. That might be the best thing we've ever seen in baseball field in a long time, or ever see again. That was electric. Absolutely, we could do a whole podcast on WBC, so I'm not going to go any farther because I fell down that rabbit hole in my last episode, and it was so awesome. But I'm going to leave it at that, and maybe I'll do a show someday. We just an hour and a half of drooling over the WBC. But let's talk some kind of. Again, I don't know the proper word you think doing this many years, storylines, scenarios, situations, whatever you prefer. And we'll go team by team. It's alphabetical order. I just went down roster resource and kind of went through what's going on these days. And we'll start with the Baltimore Orioles, where it's like you got the young O's. Like you see Alex Fast and other Orioles fans talk about it. They're all hyped up. You got these young Orioles. You got your Gunnar Hendersons. Your Kyle Stowers is having a big spring, showcasing some power. Everyone loves Grayson Rodriguez. Question how many innings, all that kind of good stuff. We'll start with you on this one, Kevin. How are you kind of viewing these guys? Because and for the listeners, we're using main event ADP at the point of recording. There's been 10 main events that have taken place, so it's a pretty good sample size. Gunnar Henderson's got a 104.9 ADP. Kyle Stowers 429.4, and Grayson Rodriguez 178.7. So, Kevin, how are you kind of approaching these guys? Because young guys are always like the shiny new toy, but there's always like concerns also.
Yeah, I don't have these guys on many of my rosters, if at all. Actually, I might have a Gunnar Henderson share because that third base drop off. He's kind of the end of it. Everybody's been talking about that all off season. I may have a share or two of him, but I really have my eye on Stowers right now over these last few days, going into our first fab weekend of the season, because he's only been drafted in when I made my notes when there'd been 9 main events drafted. He was only drafted in 5 of those 9. So he's available even in 15-team leagues out there this weekend. So he's one of the guys that I'm keeping an eye on as we're putting things together to shore up our teams before the start of the season next Thursday.
Yeah, Stowers is one that I had a lot of DC shares of. I was a big fan of the power. He's got surprisingly no home runs this spring though, which was just a surprise, but the run production, everything's been good. Adam, how are you looking at the young Gunnos? Because similar to Kevin, I don't have any Gunnar or Grayson Rodriguez on my squad.
Yeah, I don't have any Gunnar. I don't have any Stowers. Honestly, I don't know that I really expected Stowers to make the opening day roster. I kind of assumed he would start down in the minors and be maybe a short order come up, maybe even in May. After that time manipulation, because I don't foresee him being somebody that's going to compete for Rookie of the Year. Though I don't even think he might not even be eligible for that. The awards that teams could get if they win. I do have, 2 out of 15 of my teams. I did end up picking up Grayson Rodriguez in a few places. The innings, because of where he was, and it really got to a point where it depended on how I was drafting my team, and it got to a point where he was just he was the best possible option at that time. As you're referencing ADP. For the main event, he's going around guys in the main event around John Gray. He's going around Alex Cobb, Patrick Sandoval. In what I think Grayson Rodriguez could do at the very beginning of the year, regardless if he gets pulled back or pushed back in innings later on in the year, which is I think how they'll end up doing it. they very well could cut off his innings in game. But I think that it's going to be more of a phantom IL stint or spread out his innings throughout the course of the year. Maybe you can cut them off at the end if they're not playoff bound. And I think that what he can do from the get-go is, heads and tails above what you're seeing for other options, especially like the other injury concerns of like John Gray, like I mentioned earlier. So I am a little bit in on Grayson Rodriguez. I haven't touched Gunnar. I don't have any Gunnar shares. For me, if I didn't grab one of those first three, top third baseman, I was usually waiting until the, Matt Chapman tier, that range. And because that, right around, pick 100, it was usually where I was either double tapping catchers or picking up another closer in that range as well. So I had a certain direction I was looking to go in where Gunnar ended up going in most drafts.
Yeah, I had similar Gunnar thoughts with me. It's just one of those, I got to see it for where he's getting drafted type thing. And so I was doing the same thing. If I can get like a J Ram or a Machado or something, I was going farther down the list, just like you. And the one thing you mentioned with Grayson, and that's just my biggest concern, is how do they utilize his innings? If they just said right out the gate, hey, we'll let him go through them in the first 4 months of the season, like just go 6-7 innings. Okay, cool, drop him, you're good to go. I'm just worried about how they go about those innings. Sure. Is my biggest concern. But you mentioned the guys he's going around. If you're talking ceiling plays, 100% agree with what you got there. Let's go Boston Red Sox. This is a fun one. Triston Casas is a guy that we all know the immense power he brings to the table. Last year's kind of cup of coffee, like most young guys, didn't go probably as greatly as planned, one would say. But this spring, tearing the cover off the baseball. He's hitting 341, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, even 3 doubles. He's just doing everything you'd want to see him do. And it's carrying over to his ADP at 216.5 because it definitely was not that high early in draft season. So we'll start with you on this one, Adam. How are you approaching Triston Casas? Because right now, even Roster Resource has him projected to lead off, which is bonkers. How are you going about this? Because he's all of a sudden entered my kind of chat in my draft brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he led off was it this first spring training game of the season or right around the beginning, and Roster Resource has been running with that ever since. I mean, we got to remember spring training. I mean, you just had Mike Curlin on there as well. I think you guys talked about this, but there's a lot of guys missing from most of the spring training rosters through the WBC. And so you're missing a lot of pieces that could or should be in lineups in different positions. So it gives Alex Cora and every other manager the opportunity to try different things out. I'm definitely going after Casas more so now than I was at the beginning of the offseason, because I think the number one concern with Casas was that he was going to end up being in a platoon. Not because there wasn't other options, just because that's just who he was or who he was going to end up being. And he was going to mash when he was on there. But now Alex Cora came out pretty early on in the offseason saying, we want to give as much of a look at Casas as possible. And then, of course, they cut Eric Hosmer and they pretty much opened up the floodgates as far as playing time for him. And now Bobby Dahlbeck's going to be the starting shortstop now, apparently.
That's insane.
He's not even an option at first base. I'm going as far as saying I don't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem with a team waiting all the way and pushing Casas up their draft board to be their starting first baseman at this point. If you really wanted to skip out on those top tier guys, the same way I looked at third base. If I'm not getting a top tier third baseman, I'm waiting until, pretty far down the list. Casas, it's a risk. It's just like Gunnar, but you're still not paying Gunnar prices at in that rookie. You're still paying, that plus 200 range and what you can get out of that. Now, of course, he's better as your corner and your backup first baseman. But if you're desperate and you really want to go that direction, I wouldn't blame anybody for it.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking at his ADP climb. He's gone as high as 191 in these 10 drafts, but, he's right behind Josh Naylor. That Casas on paper might have the higher ceiling there, I'd say. You got Drury, Cronenworth going ahead of him. Josh Bell maybe makes it a little more interesting conversation. Then you get the Ty Francis of the world, but that's like a whole 20 to 30 picks up as you move up. So what to your point of waiting, it's like, okay, 100% good with that, but if you are going to wait on him, maybe jump him around or two just to make sure you get him. Because if you don't get him, you're in a world of hurt after that. I won't mention the names after that. That gets tricky. So, Kevin, how are you looking at Triston Casas right now?
Yeah, I think this is one of those players I'm going to wish I had paid more attention to throughout draft season. I don't have him on any of my rosters, and what we've seen from the spring and everything Adam just said, I agree with. I probably should have been a little more on him, but a couple of guys we're going to talk about when we get to the Guardians, one going right in front of him and one after him. I have quite a few shares of both of those guys when we get to this range. So yeah, unfortunately, this is going to be one of those guys. If he continues to play the way he's looked like he can in the spring and what we've expected while we've been waiting the last couple of years, I'm going to wish I had him on more of my rosters or any at all even.
Yeah, I don't even want to look at my player shares page right now because I'm pretty sure it's a 0 next to his name, and that's not cool. But I got 3 drafts to remedy that, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I've got 2 pieces, but they're both in my most 2 recent drafts. So
yeah, I totally was like you guys. I was like, he's gonna platoon. He might not even make like all these things, or he's gonna hit 8th. Or like early projections had him hit 7th or 8th. Like I kind of, I'll take you mentioned the Guardians players or something, and now it's like, yeah, this might not be the best plan. Masataka Yoshida. I'm working on that, guys. This is a fun one because for us baseball nerds, we knew who he was. We knew he had OBP skills. We knew all these things about Masataka Yoshida. And then the World Baseball Classic happened, and now millions of people know who Yoshida is, not let alone most of the fantasy community. So his ADP right now is 197. It's gone as high as 174. I honestly think it's going to keep going. I call it the WBC helium. I think that's going to keep climbing up. So I'll start with you on this one, Kevin. Are you in on Yoshida? And then I guess the real question is, how high is too high? Because he's going to keep rising.
Yeah, I'm in now, but it's too late, kind of like Casas. I was I agreed with I think was a pretty popular opinion. He was going to hit at the top of the lineup, score a lot of runs, have a great batting average. And that's not what I was looking for in the range of ADP he was going. But now we've seen a little more of the power, and it looks like he's going to hit cleanup in that lineup possibly. At least that's where Roster Resource has him, and that's about where he may end up. And then that bumps up the RBI. And if he is going to hit a few more home runs than we thought he might, then yeah, I missed out. Once again, just like Casas throughout draft season. But now how high would be too high? Right in this, there's some guys in this range where I do have shares of that I may wish I'd had Yoshida instead. I mean, man, a lot of us love Jared Kelenic, and he's looking good in the spring, but I'd probably rather have Yoshida. I'm one of the fans of Lars Nootbaar. What we've seen recently, could he jump up above him in ADP? Maybe, and I might agree with that. So yeah, I think he could move up a little further than right at 200 where he's at now. And once again, just like with Casas, I think this is a guy I'm going to wish I had more exposure to.
Yeah, it's like when you look at it, you mentioned Kelenic, Nootbaar, like Joey Meneses. I probably, if I don't need a ton of power, Yoshida. You got Bellinger, who I'm still not a believer in, but some people are. Seiya Suzuki, they seem like a pretty even comp, honestly, and that's like a 30-pick difference. So we'll see how it goes. I'm curious to see how Vegas handles Yoshida this weekend. Adam, how are you looking at Yoshida? Because I think what we're coming down to, it seems like most of us ignored the Red Sox is what it came down to. Because on paper, and I think I'll be like, just for the listener's sake, I think we had reasoning behind this. When spring started, this team was a dumpster fire. And the lineup was a mess. Pitching staff still a mess. There's still other things, but typical spring training, things are getting cleared up a bit. And now it's like react situation. So, Adam, how are you looking at your?
Hey, the Red Sox couldn't lose a game when spring training started. They went undefeated in their first, like, I don't know, like 10 or 12 games. It was crazy. But as far as Yoshida specifically goes, Yoshida is my most rostered player in all of draft season. 15 drafts. I have 10,
nice.
10 drafts in which I was able to pick him up. Of course, that ADP ranges because I was drafting him long before he was posted and still continue to do so. And let's be specific. These are NFBC formats where you have 5 outfielders. That makes a big difference. In your Yahoo leagues, in your CBS, wherever there's only 3, and of course you have utility. Is a lot less. I'm a lot less interested in those formats because of what he brings to the table. And yes, the power is there. It's not. I mean, let's not let the one series that the WBC inflate that. But I also was going back to the Japan series where he hit that moonshot in Game 5 of their championship series, and ended up winning that game due to that, or partly due to that at least. So there are definitely highlight reels that you can reference to show that he's got more power or more pop than I think a lot of people were assuming. But really what it comes down to is that around 200, or where I was drafting him like early in draft season at like 285, closer to 300, you can't find that batting average or that potential batting average unless it's completely empty batting average at that point. And Yoshida is obviously going to be in the heart of a lineup that is not going to provide empty batting average. That batting average is going to translate into counting stats, whether it's RBIs in the cleanup spot or runs toward the top of the order. He's came out and said that, he's not used to being at the top of the order. He wasn't expecting to be the top of the order guy. He is more comfortable in the leadoff, but he'll do whatever, Alex Cora tells him to do, he said. But I'm not too surprised that he's going to be closer to the middle of the lineup, just because that's where he's comfortable and that's where he's shown success in the past. As far as the rest of the Red Sox go, I mean, there's still so many question marks about what's going on here. Is Adam Duvall actually going to hit, put bat to ball? Simple as that. Like, he went 0 for 18, and then he finally hit a home run. And he's the everyday center fielder. Jarren Duran has obviously been in Team Mexico for WBC, so he hasn't really been able to be in camp to kind of show that he shouldn't start in the minors next year. They've got other guys kind of coming up that could fight for a role from a defensive standpoint, and the Red Sox have a history of doing that with Jackie Bradley Jr., Jarren Duran actually as an example. So I'm not sure. I've got plenty of exposure to Duvall as well, just because he's got the job now, and we'll see if he holds on to it. But I mean, the fact that I think somebody drafted Trevor Story in the main event is kind of weird. We'll see how that turns out. See how long they hold on to him. Maybe they know something I don't. But there's so many other question marks in the infield. I am curious to see the Bobby Dahlbeck in the middle infield experiment, and we'll see.
Well, the Red Sox diehards keep telling me that it's still Enrique's job. He was just playing for Team Mexico. Calm down, sure. Blah blah blah. Which sure, but hey.
It's still fun to watch.
Oh yeah, that's why. Most people should know me by now that I'm a very sarcastic person. So when I tweet stuff out, I tweet out, usually I'd say 80% of it's a joke. And so the Bobby Dahlbeck tweet, people, of course, serious Red Sox fans, they did not take it so funny. I'm like, I get it, guys. I know he's not the everyday shortstop. That was 100% a joke on this one. But yeah, it's fun in Red Sox land these days. It's like Panic at the Disco, and that brings us to Chris Sale, who has looked electric. He gave up some runs his last start, but the velo's there, and most of us, that's all we care about right now. He's got the strikeouts, he's got the velo. His ADP is around 100 right now. That's moved up since my Monday night show. It's crazy. It keeps creeping. Went as high as 81 in drafts. So I'll start with you on this one, Kevin. How many innings does Chris Sale have to pitch to be worth? Let's go with the 81, because I think he's still going to move up this weekend, ADP wise. How many innings does he have to pitch to bring the fantasy value that people are basically hyping him up for right now?
I think if we get to that 130 or 140 that most projections are giving him, that's probably going to do it for us. And if, I don't think it takes a whole lot of starts for him to get there. And by whole lot, I mean, he's these projections on his inning projections are based on 25 or 26 starts on all the systems that you see on Fangraphs. And he's only a 5 1/3 to 5 2/3 innings per start. Last time he was healthy, which 2019, we're going back a long ways, and things have changed the way starting pitchers are used. But if you go back to the last time he was healthy, he was getting more like a full 6 per start, and up to 2017, 7 innings per start. He was a way over 200 innings per year guy there for 4 out of 5 seasons. So I think he can probably go a little deeper into games than he's being projected for. And if he does that, then we're getting to that 150, 160. And then he's definitely worth the min pick here that you mentioned. And we're probably going to see that rise.
Yeah. What about you, Adam, on this one? Because it's the $1 million question. If you want to take the gamble on it, he's got to hit that number, basically.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. It's a gamble, but at the same time, I mean, Sale. What's really surprising to me is that, first of all, he looks good, and he's not the opening day starter for the Red Sox.
Yeah, it's true.
The
Good
whole
point.
storyline that he's not going to be, they don't want to put that pressure on him or whatever. I mean, okay. I mean, this Chris Sale, like, you've seen all the highlight reels of him throwing chairs and getting angry. He is a pressure dude. Like, he lives for that. And it's in Fenway. It's a little surprising. But that being said, nobody's going to limit Chris. I don't think anybody's going to try to limit Chris Sale's innings. I think only Chris Sale will limit his own innings when it comes down to it. I don't think the Red Sox are at a point where they're, you know what, we got to save you. We got to save that arm. And I would totally expect him to get up to that projected inning mark that Kevin was talking about, 130, 140, maybe even plus. And we all know that when Chris Sale is healthy, he is Chris Sale. And I've got two pieces of the pie of my 15. And they're both in like a draft and hold setting. I almost wish I took more risk on him in fab leagues, as you can make your decisions a little faster with him. This is not a guy where you're going to have to wonder what's going on with him early on in the season. You're going to know, is he right as rain? Is he good to go? Is he going to be limited for whatever reason? Or is he, going at full speed? And you're not that you're going to drop him right away per se, if he's not 100% out of the gate, but at the same time, you're going to know right away. You're not going to have to wonder. And I like that a lot with, especially any guy that I'm going to put any kind of risk into, or any kind of, take a chance on. I want to know by the end of April at the latest what I've got.
True. Question for you, Kevin. Just a quick one on this one. Chris Sale, how high is too high ADP? He's 81, is a bit high so far.
Yeah, so he's the 25th starting pitcher off the board. I had to check my notes there real quick, and he's probably better than that from what we've seen so far, right? I've been saying this about a lot of these players. A lot of these players you picked out here today, Bubba, all guys I'm gonna wish I had more of. I think I'd be comfortable taking him as a top 20 guy if I was doing a draft today.
Okay. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm looking at the guys going around him right now, and between, I think at this point, I'd take him over Joe Musgrove. I would probably but I wouldn't take him over George Kirby. And so these guys, obviously you have your different senses of who you think is going to, break out or continue to grow as they're going. I probably, put him right in the same range as Robbie Ray. Kevin, I know how you feel about Robbie Ray.
I definitely take him over Robbie Ray. Everybody knows that.
But like, I think that, if you're looking for the upside and strikeouts and what have you, I think Robbie Ray has the ability, he's almost guaranteed to not only pitch more innings, but also put up more counting stats in that range. But I think where he's going is pretty much where I think I've already kind of hit my limit there, and I probably wouldn't go much further.
All righty. Let's go to the Chicago White Sox. And stop me if you've heard this before. Eloy Jimenez has an injury. It's a calf injury. They're not too concerned with it. Are you guys concerned with this situation? Because when you look at his main event ADP right now, we're sitting at a wonderful, if it loads, there you go, about 73, give or take right now, 18th outfielder off the board. So, Adam, how are you feeling about Eloy Jimenez entering draft weekend? You're on mute.
I've gone pretty good at this, and I'll show. And I finally got a hiccup with the mute button. But I don't have any pieces of Eloy this season. I don't foresee myself, if I jump into one more draft, of getting one. It's the whole risk reward thing. Yeah, of course. If he's perfectly fine throughout the season, he gets close to 140, 150 games, plays the entire game throughout the season. He's a second rounder at worst, really, more than likely, based on talent. But it's just not a direction I want to go with my teams. I've got enough to manage. I'm not looking to manage Eloy's playing time situation based on his injury history, based on what we're seeing already in spring training. Granted, I mean, it was a calf, right? It's like, not to say that can't linger, but I mean, at least it's not an oblique. I'll give him that. And he looks like he's going to be back in short order. At least that's what the reports were. But still, like, I mean, this is, I'm not, touting like I'm avoiding him because of injuries, but I was avoiding him because of the concern of possible injuries. And this is just, kind of gotten to a point where what can we expect moving forward? And not for me.
What are you doing with Eloy, Kevin?
A very first draft of the season out in Arizona, early November, when we were watching the World Series out there, I took him in the 4th round and realized quickly after, as more drafts started happening, I probably didn't have to take him quite that early at that time. And now we do. I'm happy with him on my rosters. I'm not too worried about the calf. I know he wants to play outfield, and they'll probably appease him a little bit and let him play out there some. But I think this calf issue is, I know it happened as he was running to first base, but it's just a little more incentive for the White Sox to use him at designated hitter more often. And I have him on several teams. I'm still happy about it. I'm not too worried about the calf. And right around where he's going is where I know we need to take him, early 5th round here. So, yeah, I'm an Eloy fan. I just hope. See, most of his injuries have been fluky kind of injuries and not soft tissue. And as long as that keeps up, this calf issue doesn't bother me. If his previous injuries in the past had been more soft tissue, then I'd be really worried about this calf issue. But right now, I'm not.
Yeah, no, the Eloy one's a tough one. It's we know the talent's there. Stay on the field and play DH. We're good. Don't go in the field and get hurt and we're in trouble. So it's kind of the $1 million question with Eloy. Oscar Colas is having a monster spring, trying to make a name for himself with the White Sox. Non-roster invitee, so he's not on the 40-man. So that move would have to happen to stay on the team. That's been the kind of discussion I had with Kurland and whatnot. That the biggest hiccup in Colas. It seems like he's going to be the starting right fielder. That seems to be the move. But they still have to make other moves, as I kind of said. When you're drafting right now, his ADP is 257. So, Kevin, are you in on a guy like Oscar Colas?
Not quite yet. He's still not on that roster. It appears that he probably will be, but this is a little early for me for someone we still don't know for certain is going to start the season with the team. We're talking 11th or 12th round of a 15-team league, and I'm not using a pick there on someone that I'm not certain is even going to be with the team to start the season.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. What about you, Adam? What are you doing with Oscar Colas?
I don't have any Colas shares. It less to do with the fact that he possibly could not be on the team. I foresee him being the starting, playing every day in the outfield, especially with his Eloy moves as well, where he could be spending more time at DH because of the calf. But I just don't necessarily think that Colas is going to provide us with the type of projections that I think a lot of people are hoping for based on the power that he obviously has. But he also comes with a lot of, swing and miss in his game as well. I wonder how much time he will end up playing, even if he is like the opening day right fielder. And so I've been avoiding him in general just because I don't necessarily believe that he will be providing me with positive value on a regular basis.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks is the bottom line with Oscar Colas. And at that point in the draft, there's still some pretty solid dudes to be taken around him. Like at least the guys, like Brendan Donovan's having a good spring. Jake Fraley's right in front of him. Mitch Haniger, Trey Mancini. If you're talking outfielders, at least kind of their positioning on the situation. So it makes it tough to gamble on a first timer in that scenario. Last White Sox question I have for you, and this is more of a selfish question because I want to get your guys' opinion on this. It's Lucas Giolito, ADP of about 131, 132 right now. We know last season horrific. There's no sugarcoating that. It was bad. He was going through different mechanics and pitch mixes. He's a very cerebral pitcher. If people listen to my other shows, I love Lucas. I've talked about him a lot. I love the mindset of the man. We've seen him come back in shape this year. Last year, he put weight on because he said he needed more longevity in the season. That obviously affected his mechanics. He said, screw it. I'm going to figure it out this way. I know spring training is just spring training, but Velo looks back. Things are looking good for Giolito. Adam, and are you looking into maybe taking chances on Gio for a bounce back? Now, when I say bounce back, I do want to clarify for listeners. A year ago, he was like on the 1-2 turn as an ace. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's at ADP 131 right now. Maybe we get him an 80, at pick 80 value, 70 value, something along those lines. Are you willing to take that chance on Giolito this year, Adam?
I want to say yes, but I haven't. So it's disingenuous of me to say yes completely. How he's been performing during spring and the velocity and like just in general what I've seen and also obviously what I've heard. Obviously listen to Nick Pollock when it comes to pitching. I'm back in. I would definitely take more chances on him if I had another draft where he was going. And if I can pull that, I've got outfielders still up here.
About 130-ish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, typically I will find myself not going heavy on starting pitching to beginning. I'll usually get my one ace and I'll wait a little bit and fill up my some core of my hitters. And then I'll, get 2 or 3 guys all in a row. And usually it's right after that 100 mark that I'll be targeting at least my, SP2 or SP3. If not SP3 and SP4, and Giolito would definitely fit within that. I think that he's also got the mentality of someone who isn't happy with himself, isn't happy with what happened last year. He's going to want to be able to prove that he wants to, that he can get back to where he was. He obviously is going to be playing for a, free agent contract in the near future as well. So he needs to be able to bring that back up and bring his stock back up for his own, financial gain as well. So there's a lot going right in that direction for him. And so it'd be somebody, at least from a narrative standpoint, that I'd be jumping in for.
What about you, Kevin? What's your thoughts on Giolito?
Yeah, I do have several shares and wish I had more. I've been of the opinion that he would figure this out in the off season. And from what we're seeing with, you brought up the velocity. That's huge for me. He's already throwing at or above where he ended last season. So as he continues to ramp up, it looks like his velocity is going to be back, and that's huge. Along with the mechanics, I think we missed the boat if we didn't grab him, especially when he was going quite a bit lower. I was getting him 11th, 12th round, and now here we are, and he's went in the 7th round of a main event. And I think this weekend in Vegas, that's probably where he's going to be grabbed on average, is more of that min that we saw in New York and online. So I'm very happy I got him where I did, and I'd still be in at that point if I'm drafting him this weekend. The velocity is what I wanted to see, just to verify my thought that I thought last year was a fluke, and we've seen it. So I'm all in.
Yep, we're on the same page on that one. Let's go to the previously mentioned Cleveland Guardians, a fun team. They surprised, I think, a lot of us last year in winning baseball games, and I think it's because they can pitch. And one of the things is Triston McKenzie sticks. Had a heck of a season, heck of a first full season for Triston McKenzie. And now with that success comes an ADP bump of around 82. So, we just mentioned Chris Sale's gone as high as 81. He'd be going right around Mr. Triston McKenzie is what it comes down to. So you have to start picking your battles here. Kevin, what are your thoughts on McKenzie? Because I'll be 100% honest before you guys talk. I have 0 shares. I am nervous about the guy. I just have a lot of questions. So what's your thoughts on Triston McKenzie?
When it comes to starter pitching, I put a lot of trust in people that know more about pitching than I do. And I did get a couple of shares early in draft season and then stopped. Nick Pollock's got him at 49 right now for starting pitchers. He's going as the 26th starting pitcher off the board. That's a big jump. Eno Saris has him down in that same range. 2 of the smartest pitching guys out there have him well below where he's being drafted. I'm out.
Yep, I'm with you, 100% with you. What about you, Adam? What's your thoughts on Triston McKenzie?
Yeah, I don't think I have any McKenzie. I've been avoiding him, just avoiding the drop-off that it seems to be inevitable. Instead of quoting Nick Pollock specifically, I will just quote his PLV as well. He has two of his three pitches that he throws the most are below average, well below average for his slider. The fastball is just at average at 5.035 being average. And so this seems as though, he obviously produced very well for people who rostered him last year, and congratulations if you were in that boat. It does look like he might have hit a little bit of luck. And he definitely broke down a little bit as time went on. And I foresee that luck kind of coming back at him in 2023. Cleveland does wonderful things with their pitchers. We all know this. And we'll see if they can kind of fix that. The biggest thing to echo what Nick was saying early on in the offseason was that Triston McKenzie, because as you called him, Sticks, he's the one guy that you could have really hear if you heard he's coming into camp in the best shape of his life, in the fact that he actually gained weight to control, which would add a little bit more control to all of his arsenal. That would have been great. We would have heard that would have bumped him up. We would have had more confidence in what he could do throughout the season, not break down, et cetera, et cetera. That did not happen. And so it's just one more thing that just kind of kept me out.
Yeah, like I'm too big to be an athlete like consistently like them, but Sticks seems a little too small to be doing. Like Giants fan here, Tim Lincecum, small dude, awesome,
Yep.
broke down. Like it's just, I'm not saying it's going to happen to Tristan. I hope it doesn't happen, but that's like the concern on the back of my brain when it comes to that scenario. Next Cleveland question. I'm going to go back to Kevin because he mentioned these two gentlemen earlier. They're deeper first base targets, and I'm with you. I see you smirking over on the camera. I have a ton of shares of these two, especially Mr. Josh Naylor. I've been pounding that drum for a long time. So when they signed Josh Bell, I was kind of really mad at first, and then it kind of came together. But this is just a fun one because the Bat X has Josh Bell and Josh Naylor both projected for 18 home runs this year. I think they both hit in the 20s personally, but I'm also biased. Kevin, who do you think hits more home runs between the two?
Very similar players. As you said, the Bat X has them in the same spot. I'm with you. I think they both get into the low 20s, but I think if one could go beyond that, it's Josh Naylor. I think we're forgetting he had a horrific injury, missed a long time. He's only at about a full season's worth of plate appearances back from that injury. So I think if one of them's going to take a leap and jump ahead of the other one, it would be Josh Naylor. He's still 25 years old and missed a significant amount of time with that horrific leg injury. So like you, I have a lot of both of these guys on my team. I would continue to draft them where they're going, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, but Naylor's the guy I could see going beyond. So I would, if I had to put some money down on which one hits more home runs, I would go with Josh Naylor.
We're on the same page, my friend. Adam, do you have a pick between the Naylor and Bell grouping?
I've always been a pro Naylor guy as well. So, I don't have anything else to add here, but I wish I had. This is my guy where I know I'm going to wish I had more exposure to throughout the course of the season.
Yeah. And he's going almost 2 rounds later than Josh Bell.
Bingo. Like I when I see it, it's the old thing. Like one of my favorite things I've talked about year in and year out during draft season is find players that are similar or better you can draft later in the scenario. They are the spitting image, and they just happen to be on the same team now. Like they're almost like the Spider-Man gif, and it's like you can get them 2 to 3 rounds later.
Sure.
It's a fun little deal. Detroit Tigers, I just kind of grouped some players together. So talk about who you want. You don't have to talk about them all because it's the Detroit Tigers. And it's just like my question was, Javi Baez, he could potentially bounce. They're all affordable is why I put them here. Yeah, Javi Baez, you got Riley Green, who people are hyped on in year 2. You got Austin Meadows coming back from his injury, horrible first season in Detroit. You got Torkelson, who's starting to come to life here at the end of spring training. And you got Jonathan Scope, who had a horrific season. He's free in drafts right now. So are you buying into any of these guys come draft day? Because it still is the Tigers. They're still hitting in America no matter what dimensions change. But we'll start with you, Adam. Are there any of these guys that you're looking to kind of target come draft day?
Yeah, it seems like the dimensions obviously will help a little bit, but nothing compared to what we're expecting to see out of Toronto. Yeah. And so I'm not putting too much stock into that. Anything is better than nothing, though, in Detroit. So we'll just give them that. I think of this group that you listed out here between Baez, Green, Meadows, Torkelson, and Scope. Scope and of all of these guys, Baez, those two guys that I'm interested in the most, especially where they're available at in most drafts. They're afterthoughts at their positions, as simple as that. Baez can't get worse, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, he's being drafted as if he's going to repeat the worst season of his entire career, which I get, but I think it works the same way. It's like you don't pay for what happened last year. You pay for what you think could happen in the following year, and it works. And we say that all the time for guys who had career years, and their ADP goes up. It really, think about it. It should work the same way for guys you think could bounce back, who could, adjust to their new teams and their new contracts and their new environment a little bit better in their second year. So I like Baez as obviously as a middle infield at best. He's not going to be my starting shortstop or starting second baseman if he still has that eligibility somewhere. But Jonathan Scope is going to play all the time. And I think we forget about how good he can be for you on offense. He was by outs above average. I believe he was the best defensive player in baseball last year, believe it or not. And he's going to play every day at second base, which has now become a desert of talent. And so I like these two guys here based on their price. I mean, the other guys, I don't have a problem with their price. I haven't paid up for Green anywhere. I think I feel like I missed out on Meadows and Torkelson. He seems like the obvious, like, hey, post, prospect hype sleeper, if you will, based on the talent he has. But until he actually starts hitting the ball in the air and over the fence, I'll let somebody else enjoy the fruits of that labor.
For sure. Kevin, how are you approaching the Detroit Tigers?
I know this doesn't make for great radio or podcasting, but I agree with Adam here. The two I'm interested in, and I mentioned to you, Bubba, off air before we got started that studying up on making some notes here for the show today helped me out. Jonathan Scope has only been drafted in 4 out of the first 9 main event leagues, so he's available in a lot of spots. If you lost Jose Altuve, this is where I'm going. And Adam nailed it. He's going to play every day. It's shocking to me in today's day and age, and I've missed out on him too. I don't have many shares yet. I'm going to after this weekend because in this day and age where we're looking for plate appearances, and sometimes, as I've said, sometimes I think we look into that a little too much and go a little overboard, but we do need plate appearances, and he's going to get them. And the underlying metrics for last season were right at his career average, and in some instances, some of the best his career. His hard hit rate, I think, was the second or third best of his career when I was looking a day or two ago, and his ground ball rates, everything is right at his career average or slightly better, but a 234 BABIP, and that just tanked everything. So, John, even if on teams that I didn't lose Altuve, I'm still looking to see, can I use a second baseman or a middle infielder? Is that what I need to improve my team before the season gets started? I think he's any league I'm in where he is available and didn't get drafted. I'm going to be in on him for the most part, unless I just am totally set at middle infield.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you guys. So you said you got great radio here. The thing is, with these two, Scope was my most rostered player going into drafts after drafts last year, so that stung, obviously. But it's for so many things that were mentioned, like the talent pool, his consistency before last year in and year out, and then Kevin, you mentioned the metrics. It's just like I'll buy back into the ADP 10 out of 10 times, and if he stinks, you just drop him. It's simple. And then I like the Baez idea. Just looking at it, like even last year, first year in the contract, he lowered his strikeout rate to almost below 25%, which is insane for Javi Baez. And then you just look at his quality of contact metrics; they were just really bad. His BABIP was horrible. You can't imagine, things can happen, but you got to imagine there's something back there. So Baez and Scope are two guys I'm really keeping an eye on in drafts at both positions. There could definitely end game picks at those positions, and is an interesting scenario. Let's go to the Houston Astros. You mentioned Jose Altuve, Kevin. He's going to be out 8 to 10 weeks. It's going to seem, and he has to wait till all the swelling's done and all the good stuff to have said surgeries and everything. So he's having some fun there. But David Hensley seems to be the man of the hour. First caveat I will mention to anybody that plays the NFBC, he's util only right now. So that's kind of a bummer. But he will gain second base eligibility. His ADP is 442, having a good spring, power speed guy. are you guys looking to target a guy like David Hensley for the 2 months or so he'll be around? Adam.
I mean, I don't see why not. I've said it multiple times on our show. Like, if you can get a piece of the Houston lineup, you should. Simple as that. I mean, he might be, like you said, he might be at the bottom of the lineup. But if he's at the very bottom of the lineup, I'm fine with that as well. He might not get as many plate appearances, to Kevin's point earlier, but he's going to be at a position where he's going to score some runs because the top of that lineup is going to knock him in if he can get on pace. He's not going to be a target. I'm not looking at him as being like a top 250 guy or anything like that. But to our point about Jonathan Schoop, he's going to play every day. As simple as that. I mean, Marcio Dubon might spell him every once in a while, I think, if he's on that opening day roster. But I mean, Hensley seems to be the guy. It's basically an audition for him, and he's a little older of a prospect, if you want to still call him a prospect. But I mean, he still went 10-20 last year in AAA before getting some time in the majors as well. And this is not an empty batting average play. This is, I mean, he's almost like a Altuve light, very light, is because it's Altuve. But he still is going to produce. He's going to provide probably like 80% of what Altuve brought to the table, albeit lower in the lineup. So I wouldn't say he's necessarily a target of mine, but I'm not gonna be gun shy if it gets to that point in the draft and he's still available and I need a middle infielder or a reserve second baseman on my bench.
What about you, Kevin? How are you looking at the Hensley target?
Yeah, when I saw this in the rundown, I heard Adam's voice in my head say, when you can get a piece of the Houston Astros lineup, you grab it. And I agree with that. He's definitely in play here for me, especially where he's being taken as a hopefully middle infielder very soon. One of those guys that we will have to either put in a util spot, as you mentioned, for the first couple of weeks, or probably first 2 scoring periods. So a week and a half. He might get there pretty quickly. And then, where he's going, why not? It's part of the Houston Astros lineup. And even at the bottom of the line, if he's playing every day in that 9 spot, per plate appearance, the 9 spot is like the 3rd best run scoring position in the lineup. But obviously you don't get as many plate appearances as you do at the top of the lineup, but it brings those numbers up a little bit. So Houston Astros lineup, a guy that's going to play every day, probably. Yeah, he's on. Absolutely.
Yep, I'm 100% with you. I think he's very, very intriguing. Another fallout there is Pena looks to be leading off. Tucker might bat second with Brantley out. Somebody has some more fantasy fun there as well. Let's talk about Jose Altuve real quick. I narrowed it down just for this topic here. If you just do the last 5 drafts, so kind of since the injury took place, his ADP is 200. He's gone as low as 233. So my question, we'll start with you, Kevin. How low does Jose Altuve have to be to take in a draft? Because for those that don't know, NBC does not have IL spots. You have 7 bench spots, and you already know Altuve's out at least 2 months probably. So how does that affect you, Kevin?
I think that's about right. That's where I'd be considering it. And so like in when he was still healthy and ready, Jose Altuve was in my queue in every draft I was in. I didn't get him in every draft I was in. Got him in some of the drafts I was in because I was ready to take him right at the spot where other people were as well. And now we're talking several rounds later, and that's still the case. I would be in that same situation.
And what about you, Adam?
I mean, I'm just equating this to Bryce Harper. I mean, that's basically the same thing, right? I mean, with the news that Harper is not going to go on the 60-day IL, that's a little intriguing, obviously. It's like, oh, maybe he could come back a little bit earlier. They're just keeping their options open in Philly, obviously. But Altuve and Harper, going relatively at the same spot when healthy in drafts, anywhere between 2nd and 4th round, depending on your draft. And so they're probably going to miss the same or at least similar amount of time. Maybe Harper is out a little bit longer. But really, I'll use that as my benchmark. And right now, Harper's going around 228. At least he did in these main event drafts. I mean, that's right around that same spot for Altuve. I'm probably avoiding both of them, though. I don't need to. If I'm going to be stashing somebody, I want them to be, I want to have that option a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem. I'm not the best stasher in the world. I like to be moving around like the great Vlad Sedler says. You want to churn and burn that bench. So it's tough to do so because once you draft that Altuve or even a Harper, you ain't dropping them. So now you're down to 6 bench spots, and that makes it quite interesting. Let's go to a guy that's also kind of banged up, but should be playing in Grapefruit League games this week. Maybe he already is, and I missed it. Yordan Alvarez, the wrist issue. He's been hitting off a tee, taking BP. The Astros don't seem overly concerned. He had this last year, just didn't seem to linger this long per se. So, Adam, I'll feed it to you first here. How concerned are you with this? Because I've been naive, and I just keep drafting him, saying this dude, if he's on the field, is like a 300 hitter with like 40-plus home runs. But he might not make it to the field, which is starting to make me a little sketchier now. So, how do you look at Yordan Alvarez?
I mean, I haven't drafted Yordan anywhere, and mostly just where I most of my drafts I've gone anywhere between 6th and 14th. I'm in the back half of most drafts, and I'm usually targeting somebody a little bit more well-rounded in the first round, and he's going in the first round, right? So I don't have him anywhere. That being said, I probably wouldn't have been targeting him anywhere, as well as the same concerns that I had with Eloy, and this is. We had all the same conversations last year. Like, to your point, like he had this wrist issue, or he had a wrist issue. Obviously, it was also the knees on top of that. It didn't linger, and he was fine for the most part. But we're having the same conversations again, and it's just not something that I want to have to deal with. And it's the old adage: you can't win your draft in the first round, but you can't lose it. And there's even though he could, if he produces what everybody expects him to produce, yeah, that's first round value. But there's a lot more he could lose by missing time or sapping power or all those other narratives that you hear about. That is just not the direction I'm going to go in.
What about you, Kevin? How are you approaching Yordan to come draft day?
I'm kind of on the same page as what the Astros are telling us. I'm not really concerned about the wrist. However, I'm not as worried that I may be missing out as I was, because as great of a hitter as he is, at the spot he was going in drafts before this became a concern, late first round, even moving up into the middle of the first round, I'm usually going speed if I'm a guy that has speed, unless I'm going an ace. So I don't feel, and I was like, man, maybe I should be getting some of the shares, Yordan Alvarez here. Now I'm not quite as worried about that. At the same time, I'm not real worried about the injury. If I was drafting today and he slipped to 25 like he did in one of the main events, I might have a tough decision on my hands. But typically I like to say, if there's an injury concern, I want rounds of discount, not a few spots of discount. So I'm probably still out.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to jump on that a little bit, I mean, the question I would have for both of you guys is Yordan Alvarez or Mike Trout. I mean, because they have the same reasons why Trout's being dropped into the second round are injury concerns. And yeah, of course, he's not running the way he probably could be. And so, I mean, I probably pick Trout in most scenarios if it came down to it, especially at the top or the middle of the second round. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
If they're both available, I'm taking Trout every time, because I think the Angels have figured out how to manage his back.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. Like, I obviously say I have a lot of Yordan shares. So A, I'd like to diversify right about now, get the portfolio changed. But B, as the draft season had gone on, I've looked more into Trout, and I kept going, man, he's going like mid-second round. That's ridiculous. Like, this dude legit should be, if like you said, if Yordan's a late first round pick, why is Trout not there? That's what I started thinking to myself. And that's just the habits of drafting early and not doing all your research yet. And so as the season goes on, I'm like, yeah, Trout should be more of a focus than Yordan. So I'm with you on the Trout call. Last bit of Astros news. And the thing is, with some of these really good teams, we could have talked like a whole podcast play on the Astros, but we won't. Hunter Brown. And I've made this outline before. He was scratched from his Wednesday Grapefruit League start. So I want to characterize that with back tightness. But we'll start with you, Kevin. Basically, what I wanted to know is how many innings do you think he pitches? Because that always plays into ADP, which right now is 171.6 in the NFBC. So, Kevin, what are you thinking for Hunter Brown, especially, I guess, to live up to his draft price?
Yeah, that scratch start hopefully is nothing, because I really like Hunter Brown. we already have the Lance McCullers injury. That's getting him his shot. And other injuries will happen. His projected innings of just over 100 are based on, it appears to be 10 or 11 starts and 30 to 40 relief appearances. Well, if he's starting the season in the rotation, and then there could be other injuries in the rotation.
Uh-oh, we lost something.
Sorry, guys, the wheel fell off my
No
chair
problem.
there.
Glad you're okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
I am okay. And lucky so Hunter Brown projected for just over 100 innings by projections, with just getting to double-digit starts. But he's going to be starting the season in the rotation. Other guys get injured, and on a per inning basis, he's projected to be quite a bit better than both Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy. So he could run with this job. And if that's the case, he's not going 180, 200 innings yet. He's never pitched over 126. Last season is high, but 126 is enough to get us to 150, 160. So that's what I'm looking at, and that's actually probably what I expect.
Okay. Yeah, no, it should be interesting. It's, a good one is Kode Senga is going right ahead of him, and that's got another innings interesting guy. But Adam, how are you looking at Hunter Brown this year, innings-wise?
I mean, I don't see who else the Astros are going to be pushing into that position with McCullers, obviously hurt. Is Forrest Whitley, fixed? No, maybe, but he looked okay in the spring, or at least he's had his moments. I mean, they had Brandon Blaylock last year as well, come in for some starts as well, and these guys each have an option left, so they do have a couple pieces that they could come in and kind of fill some time, fill some gaps if they want to limit Brown's innings or play some games. But unless this scratch is anything more than just wanting to limit his innings in spring training, which it very well could just be. I think that I echo what Kevin said. He could definitely run away with this. He's not going to get up to that 180 mark or anything crazy like that. But I don't see the Astros having a lot of guys that are going to be pushing him out of that lineup as well.
Yeah, it's tough. As long as he's healthy, it seems like it should be his to run with, like you guys are saying. So I don't see a scenario that changes that anytime soon, to say the least. Let's go to the Kansas City Royals and the young Royals, Kevin's Royals. We have a lot of fun stuff here, but I'll just keep it simple. You got MJ Melendez at ADP 112. You have Vinny P, ADP around 90. Based on ADP, everyone's hyped on both these guys, obviously. Based on ADP, Adam, who do you think returns the most value between Melendez and Vinny P?
I mean, based on ADP and also based on position, I think it's Melendez. I think it's just the fact that he's going to be playing every day, whether he's in the outfield or, I know, Kevin, you talked about how he's basically only playing with an outfielder's glove in spring training. I'm crossing my fingers because I've got him in a couple places in Dynasty Keeper formats that, he plays enough behind the plate where he continues to have catcher eligibility going into 2024. But talking strictly 2023, he's catcher now. That's all I care about. I think that it's a pretty easy call that as far as position goes and ADP is going a little bit later as well. He'll provide me with more value based on those factors than Vinny P will. Not to say anything negative about Vinny P, but just based on those factors, I'd be going Melendez.
What about you, Kevin? Are you going Melendez or Vinny P based on ADP?
Based on ADP, I am still Vinny Pasquantino because as good as he was last year, it was a really slow start for quite a while. And even when it got better, we didn't see the power that we know he's capable of. The projections have him, mid to high teens and into the low 20s in home runs. And this is a guy that possibly this year, definitely within the next couple of years, is going to approach and probably hit 30 home runs with the great plate discipline he has and everything said. Unfortunately, Adam, the one thing I will add on Melendez is I don't think he will be catcher eligible in 2024. He's the everyday left fielder. Freddie Furman is making this team as the backup catcher. And unless there's an injury to him or Salvador Perez, we might not see Melendez behind the plate a single time this season.
Wow, that is interesting news. I like that quite a bit. For me, I've got a ton of Melendez shares. Love Vinny P, ton of Melendez shares. So it's an interesting debate. That's why I asked it, because we had two different answers, which is great. So very, very intrigued to see how that one plays out. Go back to you on this one, Kevin. Bobby Witt Jr. has been a very kind of polarizing name on the draft streets. Third base shortstop eligible is awesome in my mind. Through the main event so far, ADP of 10.5. Are you a believer in this ADP, or do you think he should be maybe going second round per se?
Early in draft season, I thought he should probably be going second round. But then, I am one of those that believes that Jose Ramirez is the number one overall pick. And some of that has to do with what he can do as a third baseman. So as draft season went on and Bobby Witt Jr. kind of has stayed in that, 8 to 11 range, depending on who you're drafting with, I started grabbing him in a couple of spots. If he does what he did last season, that makes it worth the pick. There may be players that will return higher dollar value, but the fact that his value comes with 30 stolen bases can make him worth that pick, depending on how you want to build your team. So with the third base eligibility, even though he's, as the Royals are saying, he's their shortstop, but he is third base eligible for this season. That kind of swayed me as draft season went along, and I did start grabbing him in that spot.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. It's that positional eligibility / flexibility that makes a big game changer for me. And I think and he's still so young. Like, have we even seen the ceiling for Bobby Witt Jr.? That's my other question. So I understand. I'm with you also, Kevin. Like, early in draft season, I'm like, man, I'd rather have so many guys than what we saw here. But then again, that's why we do all the research, we do all the podcasts, we do everything. And the positional thing really started to stand out. Like, we know third base stinks, but third base and shortstop's MIC. There's so much love in that scenario. So, Adam, how do you see Bobby Witt? Is he still like a top 7 or 8 pick for you, or 10, I guess, right now? Or do you think he should be more in the second round?
No, not that I think he should be in the second round, but I haven't grabbed him in the first.
That's my
round
thing. I'll specify too. I have no shares.
Yeah,
that's been the hard part.
The only share,
because Adam was smart enough to be grabbing him last season when I thought he was going too high. As a Royals fan, he was grabbing him and I wasn't. So he got the good deal on Bobby Witt Jr.
That is a little part of it. It's like, right, when you grab a great deal the year before and you get all that, sweetness, you don't want to have to pay up for it the next year. I mean, no, but I mean, it's all based on the positional flexibility here. It's the dual eligibility in the corner, the middle, what he brings to the table at the third, everything Kevin said there. Because if he was any one position, even if it was just third base, I think he'd be going closer to Michael Harris. Like, he's in the same kind of realm. He brings the similar profile to the table, and stats, what he's going to volume his way up. Whether or not he volumes his way up into closer to 200 combined RBIs and runs, I think that's the biggest question on that Royals team. Yes, it's getting a lot better. We just talked about Melendez, we talked about Vinny P, but I question whether or not he'll get into that triple digits in either runs or RBIs in that lineup. So with that being said, I don't have any shares. If he dropped to the turn in a certain situation, I would have to definitely think about it, because if you got to get him in the second round, you got to push him up, even if you think he's a more of a middle second round pick. If that's what you're going for, obviously he's a third baseman. If you draft him anywhere at that range, you're not drafting him to be your starting shortstop, most likely. But yeah, the only exposure I have to him was in the very early PitcherList mock draft. I did pick him at pick 12. That was back in early October, before as playoffs were just starting. So I kind of reevaluated ever since that one.
All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. This one kind of stood out to me because Logan O'Hoppe, a guy I love. I was drafting him a ton of spots earlier in the season, but then if you listen to beat writers, you listen to the manager, you listen to anybody on play, Max Stossey's the starter. They want to get Matt Theis there because he's out of options. And everything I've seen, unless it's changed magically somewhere, is Logan O'Hoppe starting the year in AAA, unless something weird's happening. You guys can totally clarify if I'm wrong. His ADP so far in the main event's 283.9, as high as 260, as low as 330. Now, yes, Roster Resource still has him as a starting catcher. I just checked that. That's interesting. But it's a big, big question mark for a guy that's going off the board in the middle of the catcher's pack in a two-catcher league. So, Adam, how are you looking at Logan O'Hoppe? Because I love the talent. If he was guaranteed to start, he'd be almost a top 10 or 12 catcher for me. But I don't even know if he's making the roster on opening day. So how are you looking at him?
Yeah, I got 3 pieces of the pie here in early drafts with the expectation that he was either the starting or, had the majority of the playing time there. And then same thing as, you start listening to more people. I'll give a shout out to the Fantasy Baseball Beat. Those guys, as they were doing their Angels episode, they talked about how Hoppe's not the starter. Simple as that. And this was before any question of whether or not he was going to make the team. At the very least, he's not the starter, even if he's on the team. I pulled back drastically on my targets of him. Same thing could be said about Bo Naylor in Cleveland. I was targeting him a lot earlier in drafts. And I'm still okay with. I got him on a Gladiator. I think I had both of these guys on the same Gladiator team, which is really unfortunate because there's nothing I could do in April at the very least if they're both not on the team. And obviously, Naylor's already been sent down. So yeah, Hoppe's not somebody I'm looking at. Might be somebody I'm looking at a free agent bid if he, shows that he's playing every day or getting the call. To your point, if he's not on the team, obviously the talent is there and he's shown it. And he was the key aspect of a trade with Philadelphia coming over, and he's the reason why he's was that centerpiece of that trade. He's the catcher of the future in Anaheim, assuming that they get him back on the roster.
What about you, Kevin? It's just tough for me to draft him right here.
Yeah, I echo everything you guys said. The concern for me is where we drafted him. Are we stashing him? That's the concern. That's where I'm question. At. It's hard to carry a third catcher.
Yeah,
I think this first week, unless I have a roster that's been totally decimated, I'm hanging on, and we'll see what happens. But as soon as we get into the first couple full weeks of the season, that's going to be our decision. And unfortunately, being a catcher, we might have to let him go. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's one of those going to be those tough decisions. Then you just kind of have to hope you listen to the Fantasy Beat or some other beat writers somewhere that kind of give you a heads up. Hey, he's tearing it up and blah, blah, blah. Or so you got kind of be a week ahead of the game, hopefully, because he's going to be a stud. I really believe that full-heartedly in this scenario. So it's just a matter of when, if not if, for me. The other fun in LA is Reed Detmers is the man of the hour in spring training. We saw the second half last year. He came back from the minors, a low 3s ERA, striking out everybody. Still walked a bit too many people, but not bad. The slider usage, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard it. We all know the story. This spring, velocity's up. He's looking almost even better. So, Kevin, we are now paying the price. The helium is at 141.9, which is going around Luis Garcia, Jomo, Dustin May, Charlie Morton. How are we feeling about that when it comes to Reed Detmers?
Yeah, he's right in that range where I like him better than a couple of guys going ahead of him, but I like a couple of guys behind him, maybe a little more than I like Detmers. So it's probably the right spot. And I think it would depend on the draft for me. Pretty wide range for this early in the draft, with a min of 125 and a max of 172, almost a 50 pick difference when you're inside the top 150. Pretty wide range. So it would really depend on the draft and how, if the guys right around him have already been taken or not. But I think he's in play where he's going for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot for sure. What about you, Adam? How are we looking at Reed Detmers?
Yeah, I'm jumping in easy. The water's warm here with Reed Detmers based on everything we've seen, all the things that you mentioned, Bubba. And I mean, to Kevin's point, just to name some names, it's like he's going. I mean, in these main events, at least, he's going after Charlie Morton. I would take Detmers over Morton. He's going after Freddie Peralta. I'm going to take him over Freddie Peralta with all the concerns you might have with him and the innings he puts it forth. He's going after Giolito. I mean, I think I put him in the same boat as Giolito. They're kind of like meeting in the middle. Like Giolito is jumping up for different reasons as he's coming back, and Detmers is kind of following him for the fact that he's taking those next steps. The slider usage, obviously, when he came back from his stint in AAA last year, and reworked that. I would take him over Drew Rasmussen, just because of the K upside I think that Reed Detmers has, and right up there with Joe Ryan. I mean, Joe Ryan and Detmers is probably a nice little toss up the decision you'd have to make at that point in the draft. And Ryan has the ADP of 126, so good 20 picks prior to where Detmers was going in these main events. But I'm in on Detmers for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm worried about him getting even more helium. That's the concern I have. Like,
sure.
Eventually, it's going to get to a point like if he gets closer to 100, like you're starting to talk Chris Sale versus Reed Detmers. I'm not saying Detmers going to go 40 more picks, but I wouldn't be shocked at the same time. I guarantee you, someone in Vegas takes him like around pick 100. That will happen, and that's when it gets interesting, to say the least. Minnesota Twins, the yearly question on every preseason podcast. Geez. Byron Buxton, everybody. ADP of about 88, 89 right now. Adam Howe, are you taking the gamble on Byron Buxton this season?
I never have, and I probably never will. As simple as that. I mean, it's a simple conversation. We have this conversation every year, like you talked about. Yep. I get it. It's like you pick him at pick 80, he can provide you with pick 12 value. We all get that. He won't. I'll just get right to the point. Like, he won't do it. I'm not planting a flag here. This isn't rocket science. It's like, it doesn't have to be difficult. Scott Chuo said it doesn't have to be rocket science here. I need to see it. Simple as that.
Yeah. What about you, Kevin? How are we feeling about Buxton this year?
This is pretty simple for me. If you play in one or two fantasy baseball leagues, don't touch him. If you play in multiple, like some of us do, I want him on a team or two, and it's that simple for me.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me is, if you do a bunch of teams, I definitely would have something sprinkled in there, but he's a different player now. He doesn't run as much, and that's where the, I guess, intrigue kind of is slowly leaving the building for me, if that makes sense, compared to what it was before. Like, we were talking 30-30, dude, and I think we'd be happy if we got 30-10 right now. That's a big difference with Byron Buxton. Like, if he steals even less bases, what's the difference between Byron Buxton and Giancarlo Stanton? I'm not trying to like hot take it here, but that's kind of where my head's at, trying to figure out what I want to do with Byron Buxton, basically. And for me right now, he's off the board, but everyone's got a price, as the $1 Million Man once said. So we'll see how that goes.
To echo a little bit of that, and give a little plug to something that I've worked on recently. I recently, over the offseason, did a lot of research on stolen bases and the intent that runners have on the base pass, and kind of the situations in which they do run and don't run. And I was able to work with Kyle Bland over at PitcherList, our director of analytics.
Smart guy.
Yes, he is a big core piece of PLV as well. But we were able to put together an equation that basically calculated expected stolen base attempts, and then put together a stat that we call BRAG, base running aggressiveness. And to put it this way, like a 0 is they're as aggressive as you would expect them to be. Anything negative means that they're not running where you think that they should be, and anything positive is they're running a lot more than you think that they should be. Buxton negative 52%. Aggressiveness on the base pass, with he attempted 6 stolen bases last year, should have doubled that, based on the situations he was put in, his talent level, his speed, the pitchers that was on the mound, et cetera, et cetera. So simply, like, just in the same vein as Trout, it's like he could be running because of his talent. He's just not for other risky reasons, and Buxton is exactly that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting, to say the least, watching him. Jorge Polanco injury might not be ready for regular season, which sucks, but that brings his ADP down to around 200 right now, which I guess unlike Altuve, who's around 200, Polanco shouldn't miss too much time. Obviously, Altuve is a better player. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. But, Kevin, are you interested in a Jorge Polanco around pick 200, especially with that second base landscape? It's getting real ugly real quick.
Yeah, they're calling it normal soreness in his knee.
In spring training?
Right. What's normal
maybe?
about that, right? So
I wake up sore every morning. Yeah, I call that normal. Yes.
Yeah.
And we talked about Jonathan Scope earlier, and I had been thinking that of Polanco kind of in that light, but he's going 200 picks earlier, right? So it's tough. It's tough. Until they started, saying he may not be ready for opening day due to soreness in his knee. This is exactly where you'd start thinking about him, right? Still in these main events, he's went as late as pick 251. However, he's being drafted as a starting second baseman, not middle infielder, second baseman. And I just don't know if I can go there. There's a couple guys later that I have been drafting. I think Whit Merrifield's going to play every day. I know a lot of people don't think so. I think he's going to be in the lineup most days for Toronto.
I'm starting.
He's going later,
well, by the way. Yeah.
And then we got old, boring guys that may not have, and Polanco's one of those himself. Gene Segura in Miami, sure, that's going to bring down his power numbers a little bit, that ballpark. But yeah, I think for right now that I don't believe there's anything normal about normal soreness this time of year for a guy his age. So yeah, I'm out here.
Yeah, he's gonna be 30 this season. God, that's crazy. But yeah, like that big drop off last season, let alone the injury concerns. Adam, how are you looking at Jorge Polanco?
I mean, I think I'm looking at Polanco the same way a lot of people who rostered him last year. I don't think I had a lot of Polanco, but I mean, the adage is like, you burn me once, shame on you, burn me twice, shame on me, or whatever. And I think that's how a good majority of people were looking at him if you rostered him last year. A lot of other people are trying to take advantage of that fact, letting him drop. But now on top of that is just, he's off my board, or he had been for a while, and this definitely takes off my board as well. Too much risk at the beginning of the season. I want to make sure that anybody who's in my starting lineup or I'm drafting as such is going to be in my starting lineup in the first week of the season. And I don't know that about Polanco now.
Yeah, I'm pretty much out on him as well. I kind of wished he wasn't getting hurt. His ADP was higher, but so be it in that scenario. Well, last question here with the Minnesota Twins. We'll start with you, Adam. How are you assessing the closing situation? Like Yordan Alvarez, they pretty much said he's going to be the high leverage guy. Obviously, that means he still will get saves, but he might not be there every day. Jorge Lopez has his moments. I'm a late round DC Griffin Jacks fan. There's a lot of actually talent in this bullpen. I just don't know what closing talent outside like Duran is in this bullpen. So, Adam, how are you approaching this come draft day with the Minnesota Twins?
I'm not.
Fair, very fair.
But if I had to, I'd probably lean toward Lopez. I mean, I just think that he's going to be the quote closer. To your point, Duran's going to be the fireman. You're right. He's going to get some saves. He's going to get in there. He's obviously the most talented pitcher. I hope he's okay. I haven't seen any update, but I know he got a liner off the leg. Kirilloff hit him in the leg earlier this week. I would assume that since I haven't heard anything major from that he's going to be fine. But that would definitely even lead me toward Lopez even more so, just with the experience. Obviously, Lopez did not do himself any favors with his production when he went to Minnesota last year compared to what he did in Baltimore. But I do believe he would be the guy that will get the majority of the chances at the end of games early on in the season. Now, how that flushes out throughout the course of the season is anybody's guess. I'm also a fan of Giovanni Moran. He's not going to get saves here, but he is somebody I'm targeting in the early going of the season, as I think he's going to vulture some wins, as Minnesota has had a name for themselves to be the guy, the team that, doesn't let pitchers go, twice through the order or more than twice through the order, or they pull them before the fifth inning. It was very frustrating for those of us who rostered Twins starters for a while. But that does provide an opportunity for somebody in the bullpen with talent to be the first man up and vulture those wins. And I think Moran could do that early on in the season. Obviously not somebody that's going to be closing out games with his rookie status, but he is in the same kind of mold as Duran, where he's got great stuff. He doesn't walk a ton of guys though, so somebody I'd be just want to give a call out to from that bullpen.
That's a good call. What about you, Kevin? How are you approaching this Twins bullpen?
I'm not either. I love Duran. I love what he does, but with the risk that he may not get a whole lot of saves, a guy like this is fine for me because everything else will be great, right? He's not going to hurt you, and he's going to be better than a seventh starter on most fantasy rosters. So I don't have a problem using him as my third reliever. But there's a guy I like a lot more in him. We're going to talk about in a little bit, going about a round later. So I'll be dipping my toes in there. So yeah, I don't have any exposure to the Twins bullpen.
Yeah, kind of like Adam was saying, I've taken a few shots on Lopez super late, like as extra relief depth per se, but it's not a bullpen I'm looking to get too excited about. Let's talk about the New York Yankees Bronx Bombers here, and this is just a fun one because everyone's got an opinion on it, so we might as well on this show. Oswald Peraza, ADP of 308.8 versus Anthony Volpe, ADP of 203, 100 picks sooner. Personally, I'll just say it flat out. I think Peraza starts and Volpe starts in AAA. That's my 2 cents. So this ADP is very shocking to me. Kevin, how do you foresee this shortstop situation playing out, especially based on draft day? Would you take a chance on either of these guys?
Yeah, I think I think we probably should. I agree with you, and so I don't have any Peraza shares, and I probably am going to wish I had, especially at the very affordable cost. And I did draft Volpe in a spot or two, go a little later than where he's going now, but it's really interesting to me. And this goes back to a little bit when we were talking Tigers. I said I agreed with you about both players that we were talking about with both of you, but I didn't really mention Javi Baez. The reason that I like Baez there is because of who's going after him, right? When you get past Javi Baez at the shortstop position, you got Estrada, but he's being drafted as a top 12 second baseman, right? So then the next 2 shortstops coming off the board are Tovar and Volpe. And so that is why I like Javi Baez, because I don't think I can want to count on either one of these guys, including Volpe, because I agree. I'm going to wish I had more shares of Peraza because he played, better than people probably realize last season, and starting shortstop for the New York Yankees, pretty dang good lineup. I'm going to wish I had more of him.
Yep, with that speed in that lineup, that could be a big boy stuff if he plays the whole season. I think he will personally. I'm biased though. What do you think on this one, Adam? How are you approaching the Yankees shortstop situation, especially with a 100-pick differential in ADP?
Yeah, that's a big differential. I do have plenty of exposure to Volpe, not at the 200 mark. I'll give him that, but I would say that I'm of the opinion that Volpe very well could be the starting shortstop opening day. If for no other reason, the Yankees are giving him every opportunity in spring training to prove that. He leads the team in plate appearances. He pretty much leads the team in every statistical number that you could look up, and so he is kind of forcing the issue. We saw this with Julio Rodriguez last year. We kind of saw it with Tatis when he broke camp a couple years ago with the Padres. And when a team wants somebody to succeed, they give them those opportunities. He's leading off pretty much every day for the Yankees in Tampa, and so I mean I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that there's probably more value to be had at this ADP with Peraza, but I do think the Yankees want Volpe to be their shortstop of the future, and they want, if he's proving that he could provide them with an opportunity to win Rookie of the Year and get them the compensation draft pick because he is on all those top prospect lists and he would qualify, they may be tempted to do so. Something also to keep in mind that a lot of people say, well, if it's a debate between winning that pick or keeping him down for a little bit and gain that year of eligibility, they can do both. They can have him start on opening day, and then if he doesn't do well enough to justify a call down or push him back down to the minors in season, they can get that extra year of eligibility by doing that in season as well. A phantom IL stint in the minors, working on defense, whatever words they want to use, they can send them down in May for 3 weeks and then gain that extra eligibility. So the teams still have the ability to manipulate as much as they really want to.
That's a great point as well. And I think with the Yankees, as we know, and you guys have mentioned, they're getting old in certain spots, so there's some injuries that take place that would not shock anybody in this situation. And it's not DJ LeMahieu's still floating around there. I don't know what to do with him on draft day, but that's just a whole nother situation. Let's go to Giancarlo Stanton. I just like bringing him up because I don't know if I just like have a soft spot for Giancarlo. I know he's hurt a lot. I get it. But even when he's healthy, he just mashes baseballs. And the reason I want to bring him up for discussion here is we're not paying a premium anymore. His ADP is 153. He's gone as low as 179. Like, if this dude somehow played 100 to 120 games, I think he could pay off a 153. And God forbid he stays healthy for 130 or 140. We could see a monster season and play a lot of what ifs. I get it. But Adam, what's your thoughts on Giancarlo? Now that we're not paying a premium, like I said, is he in play at this ADP range?
I would, especially coming from me, I've got 7 pieces of the pie here out of my 15. So he's on 50% of my teams throughout the course of draft season. I mean, I'm of the opinion that if we do see that closer to dead end ball that we saw 2 years ago, that, power is going to be a little bit more of a premium. And regardless of what kind of ball you throw Stanton's way, he's gonna hit the ball far and hard. Simple as that. You could throw a beach ball made of nothing but air, he'll still find a way to hit that out of the park. And so, I mean, I'm all in, not all in. I mean, I get it. The injury concerns is there, but him and Judge were doing yoga, right? So they're better now. So that's
yoga narrative, baby.
That's all you need. And he obviously showed that he can stay healthy long enough to be useful. And so I'll play the games with him on my bench and hit him out as long as he's not going to be out for months at a time. I'm willing to take that I'll use that stash spot on my bench to hold on to him for his 14-day, 21-day IL stints that are probably going to happen.
They're bound to happen. What about you, Kevin? How are you approaching Giancarlo Stanton?
I like this. I like this spot for Stanton. I think the batting average rebounds, that was big BABIP drop for him compared to what he usually posts in most seasons. And he had over 30 home runs and only 4 for 150 plate appearances last year. So, and we know it's not like, it's not a managing an injury thing typically. He's going to play most days, so we can have him in our lineup. When he misses time, it's going to be a DL stint, so we can get somebody in his spot. And with, there's a lot of talk about the depth of outfield, especially in 5 outfielder leagues. But if I'm really trying to make sure I got a third baseman, because a lot of people think we're short there, I think some of the later third basemen are probably better than we thought earlier in the offseason. But second base really drops off. Like I said, Thairo Estrada is a starting second baseman in 12-team leagues. So if you're covering other positions and you realize, oh, wow, I only have 1 outfielder and I need 5 of them. I like Giancarlo Stanton here, and Hunter Renfroe going right in front of him. Love trying to double tap those 2 guys if I can. Really because I agree with what Adam said about the ball. And these are the types of guys where the ball isn't going to matter much when we're talking about home run power.
Yeah, that's a great point. It will not matter with those gentlemen. Let's go to the starting rotation with the Yankees. Obviously, we all love Garrett Cole. Severino's had a rough spring. Domingo Germán, question marks. Clark Schmidt, lots of hype, no doubt about it there. And then you got Nestor Cortez. So, Kevin, on draft day, which one of these guys are you interested in besides Garrett Cole?
I don't think any of them at their price. I've been passing on all these guys.
I think it's more surprising than most.
Yeah, I really don't have shares of any of these guys with their different concerns, and I haven't drafted any of them.
What about you, Adam? How are you looking at the starting pitchers outside of Garrett Cole with the Yankees?
I mean, Clark Schmidt is somebody I will be targeting in the first fab run for those leagues that drafted early, and he wasn't even a consideration just because he has the spot. But I'm probably not drafting him at his elevated cost. The one guy that I'm most interested in, even today, is not on this list, and it's Carlos Rodon. I'm willing to take that risk with his depreciated ADP. Hoping he's not missing more than 2 starts into the regular season, which is what he kind of alluded to early on. So Rodon would be somebody I'd be targeting more and taking advantage of the depreciated cost, and again stashing him for the first couple weeks of the season, hoping he comes back as good as ever. But the rest of these guys, yeah, I'm probably, unless they're available on the wire, I'm probably not paying up for them.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Rodon's interesting. I actually had that dilemma about 10 minutes ago. And someone sniped him 2 picks before me. Thank goodness, because I was literally staring at him going,
I love it when the decision's made for me.
He was like 40 picks past ADP. I literally was looking up his news information, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting now. So yeah, that took it out of my control. But yeah, I'm with it. I'm with you, Adam. Like, as he's falling in ADP, it's like that's one of the premises to a lot of these questions we're asking. Like, are the prices right, basically? And if Rodon, it's a big if, because he could come back and get hurt again immediately. We don't know really the significance of this injury, but if we're trusting reports and he misses 2 to 3 starts, so you still get, say, 25 to 27 starts from Rodon at now a depleted ADP, like an 80 to an 85 ADP, maybe he goes around Chris Sale. Here you go. Quick answer. Adam, Chris Sale or Carlos Rodon?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say I'll probably end up taking Chris Sale because he's there. He's in the lineup. He's in the rotation. He's going to start game 2 of the regular season, and we'll go from there. But it's a little tougher.
Yeah. What about you, Kevin?
I agree. I would prefer Rodon when healthy, obviously, but Chris Sale is healthy right now, so I agree.
Yep, it's an interesting dilemma, and I could see that being played out on draft day. All right, I'll read verbatim what I put on the outline here. Oakland Athletics. I'll keep this short and sweet. What A's are you seriously interested in on draft day, Kevin?
Actually, probably more than many would think.
In a deep league, I give you that much. There's going to be more than I'm giving credit.
I like Seth Brown, not as much as I liked him last year when I was getting him much later. In DCs, I like Langeliers, but like I mentioned earlier, when it's coming to catchers, I don't like carrying a third catcher, and he's UT only to start the season. But I do have a lot of Esteury Ruiz. Most of it from earlier in draft season when he was going a little bit later. I think as long as he stays in this lineup and even gets anywhere close to a 300 OBP, his stolen bases are going to be off the charts.
Yep, I'm with you there. I have a lot of Esteury early, not so much late. Adam, what are you doing with Oakland? Are you just like saying spirit and passing, or do you actually have interest in the Oakland Athletics?
I've got a couple pieces of Shea Langeliers, and this is both in Fab Leagues and in DC styles, only because I do expect him to gain that catcher eligibility rather quickly, and he makes a pretty solid catcher too in most situations. In at least one of my leagues, I drafted Langeliers and ended up doubling him up with like Omar Narvaez just because the Mets have so many games to start the season. So I'm at least going to have that stash. And with Manny Pena dealing with his own issues at catcher for the A's as the backup catcher, I would expect Langeliers to get that eligibility quicker than I think we might have thought earlier. Thought it might take maybe 3 weeks to get that eligibility. He might get it within the first 2 weeks, if not sooner than that. And so Langeliers is pretty much my target. I think I have a piece of Danny Jimenez here or there, just because they did announce that he would be the favorite to be the closer there, and even bad teams who have a dedicated closer can still provide you with saves. Let's not forget that, including the A's. If they are going to win games, they're probably going to win them by 2 to 3 runs at most. And so obviously he's an easy cut in a Fab League as well. And so those are pretty much my 2 top guys from the A's.
Yeah, we're similar. Like I liked the Ruiz early. Langoliers definitely, if you can hold him. I agree with everything you guys said on him. I think there's a lot to like there. Seth Brown will get some love. There's moments for Seth Brown in that scenario. So I think he's an option as well. Other than that, I struggle with the Oakland Athletics. Seattle Mariners. Now this is the fun team. Another team we like to talk a lot more about than just what we're going to do here. But we'll talk Big Thumper out the gate. Cal Raleigh. Monster season last year. Power was great. Batting average, not so much. And that's my only concern. That's why I want to bring him up. Is there's a lot of other catchers that provide power, maybe not Raleigh power, but close to it around his catcher range. But they all have a better batting average than Cal Raleigh. And that could change this year. He could be a much better hitter, too. That's definitely on the table. His ADP is 178.1 so far this draft season. Are you interested in a Cal Raleigh at that ADP, Adam Howe?
I should be. I haven't been, but I should be, especially if I'm the type that wants to wait until that point to be my C1. I'm probably not interested in him as my C2 at that price, if that makes sense. Like if I paid up and got a Varsho or a Realmuto, or even, in the 100 range with MJ Melendez or what have you, I'm probably either double tapping in that 100 range, either trying to grab like a Sean Murphy and a Melendez back to back or something like that. And then obviously I'm not going to get a third catcher. And if I paid up for somebody, I'm probably waiting longer than 171. If I'm like the Stars and Scrubs types. But if I waited until the 170 range for my C1, I get it. I totally get it. I think the average, especially with catchers, is a little overblown for a catcher that doesn't play as often as, say, MJ Melendez or Varsho are expected to play in multiple positions. The ratios don't play as hard when you're not putting up the same amount of at bats. I mean, same could be said about Juan Soto. Shout out Rob DiPietro for putting that out months ago. And so it doesn't hurt as hard when you're batting 220, when you're only putting up, you're putting up less than 500 at bats in the season. So there's something to be said for that. I don't think I have any shares of Raleigh, and it's mostly just because of the way I've drafted most of my teams.
Oh, that's fair. It's very, very fair. Kevin, how would you look at the Big Thumper?
Love him. In leagues where I get in a bad spot and miss out on the early catchers, I'm happy with him as a catcher one. In other leagues, I'm the opposite of Adam. I love grabbing him as a catcher two, no matter who my first catcher is. I think the batting average is coming up. Projections give him a little bit of a raise in batting average, but they could come up even a little more. And as you mentioned, both of you, even if he hits 220, just a little better than last year, in 415 plate appearances, he only had 370 at bats. So he's projected for 450 or so plate appearances this season, which is a lot for a catcher when we're playing that we want at bats game. That's quite a bit. That's a large share of at bats for a catcher. He's still only going to have around 400 at bats because he had a 9% walk rate last year, and he's projected for almost an 8% walk rate this season. So that even helps. On top of the less plate appearances, he walks a decent amount for a catcher as well. I love Cal Raleigh.
Yeah, I'm slowly getting more on board with him where I was not as big on a Raleigh guy out the gate. I'll be 100% honest. So it is becoming much more intriguing for me and palatable for me as it goes on. And one of the points Adam mentioned is we talk about the catcher's position. Should we be as worried about him at the batting average comment? Probably not. So definitely something I like there with Raleigh. More Seattle Mariners talk here. They have some fun pitchers. Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Robbie Ray, all have fantasy relevance, all kind of going within it feels like 40-ish picks apart, give or take. So they're all, that kind of shows you how good they are on paper. Kevin, let's start with you. For fantasy-wise, rank them 1 through 4. And I have a feeling I know who your fourth is, but rank them 1 through 4, please.
Absolutely. You do know who my fourth is. Luis Castillo is 1. In leagues where I wait on pitching, I have him as my SP1 on a team or 2, and I'm fine with that. I'm taking Logan Gilbert over George Kirby, only for the simple fact that I'm a little worried about how many innings Kirby can stretch out to, because it appears to me he wore down a little bit last season, in spite of how great he looked in the postseason. Towards the end of the season, he got rocked a couple of times by really bad lineups. And so I'm wondering if he wore down a little bit. So I'm a little concerned about him getting up into that 180 inning range. So I put Gilbert above Kirby, but love them both.
What about you, Adam? How are you looking at the pen here, or the starting rotation?
I'm
sorry.
really tempted to put Robbie Ray first, just because,
just for fun. Because
no, I mean, a couple years ago, I had Robbie Ray everywhere.
The year to have him, right?
Yeah, the year to have him. And then obviously I didn't want to pay up for him after his Cy Young year. But of these guys, I mean, I've been all over Luis Castillo, especially where he's going. I think he is undervalued in most drafts in general. He's my AL Cy Young pick. I threw $5 on him on DK just because why not? And so he'd be my number one, and I've got him in a bunch of places, and I'm pretty happy about it, regardless of what you might have seen in the last start or two in spring training. My number two here is probably Robbie Ray, and it really has to do with the volume and the strikeouts, and adding the new pitch and just what he's been showing in spring training, both the results on the paper and just with the velocity readings and the new pitch usage. And we'll see how that translates into the regular season. We see guys do that all the time, where they introduce new pitches in spring training, then we never see them again in the regular season. But if it's successful, there's not really a reason not to do that. Kirby is a really close number three here for me. Just we don't see the type of control out of pitchers that Kirby shows, and he's shown that throughout his minor league career, his entire professional career. You hear the whole Shane Bieber comps from the get-go, and I can see him racking up more strikeouts because of that, knowing where he can throw the ball at any given time. Gilbert's my number four. It's not for any particular reason. I'm not this is an amazing rotation to be targeting in general. Mm-hmm. If you can do a Seattle Mariner stack, I'm not going to hold it against you whatsoever. But Gilbert by default ends up being my four here.
Yeah, for me, it's Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, Kirby. But like you said, bottom line is it's an amazing grouping that could go a million different directions. So that's what makes it a ton of fun in those regards. Another question here with Seattle, another fun one, is how are you attacking the bullpen? Like Paul Sewald seems to be the guy. You got Andres Munoz, really good leverage situation. There's other talented relievers in that bullpen. So Adam, how are you going with this Seattle situation?
I lean Sewald. I think I've got a couple pieces of Sewald here or there. I know that the popular early pick in the early draft season was Munoz to kind of take over, and I think a lot of people saw that acquisition of him being as the closer of the future. But Sewald is almost like the face of that bullpen, right? He's just he's out there a lot more. Obviously, we all heard him talk with Alex Fast during PitchCon, and that was a great interview. If you haven't, you can go back and listen to that both through the Talking Pitching podcast or through the PitchCon video on the PitcherList YouTube channel. Besides that, though, I mean, he's stepped forward. He's a closer, simple as that. He's got the talent. He's got the opportunity. Sure, there'll be situations where they say, "Oh, we want him in this situation in the eighth inning to face off against X, Y, and Z," and we'll put Munoz in the ninth. And they've got other options in that bullpen as well that could step forward. They has enough depth where they felt fine to send Eric Swanson out to Toronto to bring in a bat, and so we all kind of see what the value of high-end relievers have been on the market, not only the free agent market, but also on the trade market. And so for them to feel as though they could, part with that, obviously they feel confident in the rest of the bullpen to kind of step up in those situations. So I'm going after Sewald as the primary closer here. Though I'm not going to sit here and see him come in the eighth inning and be totally surprised.
What about you, Kevin? How are you looking at Seattle's bullpen?
Yeah, this is who I was referring to when we were talking Twins bullpen. Andres Munoz is my second most rostered player in the 14 NFBC drafts I've done. I have him on over half of my rosters. I don't quite have the Doug Dennis love that we saw in Arizona, but I'm pretty close on Andres Munoz here. And I'm only really hoping for 8 to 10 saves. If he gives me 8 to 10 saves, he's more than worth the price I'm paying, in my opinion. He would be, as I mentioned, if I did draft Duran from the Twins, he would be my third reliever in my lineup on a weekly basis, but he'll be in there every week all season long in that spot. Yes, you can get starters in this range that I would rather, that are going to produce more as a starter, but just 8 to 10 saves on top of that makes him worth this price for me.
Yeah, I'm a Sewell guy just because of what he has, but I agree with your Munoz take. 100% agree with it. I think he's great. Definitely worth the depth if you need him. I just wish he was going farther in drafts. He's almost going ahead of Sewell in some drafts, which is bonkers in that scenario. But yeah, definitely interesting to say the least. Tampa Bay Rays, fun team as always. And you got Wander Franco, a guy that if people listen to me long enough, I've been hesitant on in fantasy time and time again. ADP of around 77 right now. For me, it's like, I got to see it, kid. I say kid because he's still super young. So it's crazy. Kevin, how are you approaching Franco? Like, we know the skills, the talent is there. I just don't know if it's fantasy talent compared to real baseball talent. And that's my concern. What about you, Kevin?
That's exactly where I was going. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player in Major League Baseball. I don't know that there's a lot. I mean, sure, he's projected double-digit home runs, double-digit steals, a lot of runs, which is underrated in fantasy, I think. But it's just there's people in every draft I've ever been in, somebody likes him more than I do as a fantasy player. I love him as a baseball player.
What about you, Adam? How are you looking at Mr. Wander Franco?
Franco is the type of guy that I have all the faith in the world to not only be a good, real life player, but of a fantasy asset. But I'm not willing to kind of put my money where my mouth is. I have no shares of Franco beyond the dynasty league that I have him in, and just because where he's going, kind of to echo what Kevin said, it's like where he's going, the other shortstops around there, there's just a lot safer. It's like the joke. It's like Wander Franco could be anything. He could even be the guys that are going drafted like right after him. He could even be, Xander Bogaerts. He could even be Carlos Correa. Like he could even be the guys that you could get right after that. And so just not something I'm worth paying up for based on the shortstop market that's going right around that same range. If in the one chance that I think I would consider doing is if I wanted to take a chance and double tap shortstop or double tap and use him as my middle infielder as a solid backup shortstop to somebody who I thought could take the turn down. I think he's safer in that realm, but you're not doing that at that point in the draft.
Yeah, and that's 100% where I am. I just one of those I just don't. I don't know. Maybe he does it one year and he'll do it one year and he won't be on my rosters. So that's just the scenario with Wander Franco. The last race question I have real quick for you, Shane McClanahan. We know the injury concerns at the end of last season. Velocity looks good this year. ADP is around 30 right now. Adam, are you good with McClanahan, or do you still have concerns with McClanahan?
I mean, I wish I was good because he's so fun.
Yep.
He's so good. I don't have him rostered anywhere, and that was by design. I was skipping over him, and I was going after a little safer bets throughout draft season, whether it was early or even currently, as you pointed out. He looks fine. The velocity looks up. I should be less concerned, but at pick 30. He's obviously he's going to be your SP1, maybe your SP2 if you went pocket aces or something in that range. It's too much risk for that situation for me. So I've been skipping over.
What about you, Kevin? Are you in or out on McClanahan at ADP around 30?
I'm back in now. I was concerned a little bit, but as you mentioned, the velocity seems to be there. So, but this is a spot I usually don't draft pitching. If I'm looking for a pitcher, I'm more than okay with taking him at the 2-3 turn where he's being drafted. But yeah, I was enough concerned earlier in draft season that I ended up with very few shares. He's one of those guys that I have on some keeper and dynasty teams, and I'm really happy I have him, but I haven't been drafted him in redraft.
Yeah, he's a guy I just have been avoiding because I was worried about a lot of factors we saw at the end of last season, and hopefully he proves me wrong. I'll root for him, but I don't know. I just feel like he starts out good, and then we have the same problem again, and I'm concerned. So that's where I am with one Shane O'Mclanahan. Texas Rangers, 2 more teams to go here. Adolis Garcia has been a 2020 guy 2 years in a row. Most people said he couldn't do it a second time. He did it, and he improved his strikeout rate. Right now, he's got an ADP around 63. Kevin, are you a believer in another 2020 season from Adolis Garcia?
I'm a believer in another 25 season for
That's
Adolis
my man.
Garcia. I'm a huge fan of this guy. I understand the concerns of how his profile could send the batting average way south and then the other stats follow. I get it, but he's one of these guys, I fully believe in analytics. I love them. I'm diving into them all the time, but there are exceptions. None of them are 100% accurate. Sometimes results matter more than trying to look under the, take a deeper dive and just go by results. Adolis Garcia is amazing.
Yep, I'm with you. I have him on a lot of teams this year. What about you, Adam?
I don't have him anywhere, but I am a convert for sure. To echo what Kevin just said, like the proof is in the pudding. He's done it. He's the Julio Urias of hitters, where it's like all the underlying metrics say he shouldn't be doing it again, and there he goes. He does it again. 27-25, as Kevin mentioned, could go 25-25 once again on a much improved or an improving Texas lineup. Yeah, I mean, I'm on board. I'd be going after him in leagues where, like in a dynasty or keeper league, is somebody who may be on the fence. They were happy they kept him, but at the same time, they don't believe. I'd be going after in that situation.
Yep, I'm all about him. Get a 2020 guy after you maybe got like a Rosarena or a bigger infielder. That's a great base going after like 4 rounds of a draft. That's outstanding to me. Josh Young, a guy that we were hyped up on last year, had the shoulder injury in spring. Didn't think we'd see him, saw him a bit towards the end, having a really good spring. We had high power expectations for Young. Right now, his ADP is around 210. So again, if you kind of miss some third baseman, he could be an option if you're feeling frisky. So Adam, what are your thoughts on Josh Young this year? Do you think he lives up to his fantasy, I guess, hubbub that everybody has for him?
I don't have many thoughts on Young. I was avoiding him last year. I think I had him in 1 or 2 places last year just because it's like you want to have a piece, and obviously that didn't work out. But I mean, it might be Garcia 2.0. I don't know, but like all those underlying metrics for him, yeah, he might be having a great spring, but like that strikeout rate is incredibly scary, with like a little to no walk rate to go along with it. And so I do worry about whether or not he's actually going to play enough to volume his way into counting stats that will matter. Might be a good daily moves play in those types of leagues, but in a weekly moves, I mean, I think this is going to be a guy where I don't have enough shares of, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, he's a very interesting one with Young. What about you, Kevin? Are you in or out on Young this year?
When we started the pod, it seemed like every player I was saying, I'm going to wish I had more shares of this guy. And then, so now we've went several teams without that coming up, and I'm back there. I think subconsciously, I really try to avoid doing this, but I had a lot of Josh Young last year.
Yep.
And so I really try to avoid allowing that to affect what I think of a player the following season when it comes to whether I'm pulling the trigger or not, if I like where they're going in drafts. But I think subconsciously that has been the case. I think I'm going to wish we can throw the 38% strikeout rate out the window. I think he did have a 28% strikeout rate at AAA last season as well, which was much higher than he had in 2021. Coming off that injury, I think as he gets healthy, that's coming back down. Now, will we see him down in the low 20s that we saw AA and AAA? at the major league level? Probably not. But I don't think it's going to be over 30%. If it gets down into that upper 20s to start his first full season, like projections have him for, I think we're going to be really happy at what we get from Josh Young. And yeah, he's one of those guys I'm going to wish I had more of.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm with you on that, and I might have that situation coming up here shortly. Jacob deGrom, this has been a thing, and it's just like last season all over again. Oh my gosh, he pitched an awesome bullpen. Oh, he did great in a simulated game. Now his ADP's 21. Kevin, are you in or out on Jacob deGrom this year?
In. I have a lot of shares, especially when I could get him in the third round early in draft season and continued to take him in the second. I had to pull back just because I still like him where he's going, but you can't have a guy like this on every single one of your teams. So I've had to pull back and let him go a couple of times when I did want to draft him where he's still going now.
Yep, I'm with you there as well. What about you, Adam? Are you in or out on Jacob deGrom?
I should be more in. I see him as very similar to what we talked about with Stanton earlier. When he's on the field, he's obviously producing. And if you have any kind of flexibility on your bench to stash an IL guy, this is the guy to do it. So you get all the benefit of when he's on the field, and you pair him up with somebody who can take those innings when he's off the field without dropping him into the pool. You just can't have a whole bunch of guys. Like, you couldn't draft deGrom, Stan, and Buxton all in the same spot because you only have so many bench spots in an NFBC spot to kind of stash these guys. So you do have to pick your poison when it comes to that. And deGrom hasn't been the one that I've picked, and it mostly has to do with the fact that I just haven't picked. I don't typically go pocket aces, and so I'm usually picking. If I pick one ace in the first 3 rounds, it just ends up being somebody. It ended up being somebody else.
All righty, let's head to the. Oh, and I'm out on deGrom for anybody that does not know that by now. I can't take the risk. Toronto Blue Jays, the 15th and final team in the American League. And you mentioned him earlier, and I'm glad you did, Kevin. Whit Merrifield. This is a guy that I wrote off because I thought he'd be platooning, so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. But now I'm like, you know what? I'm interested because it looks like he's going to be the everyday second baseman. Sure, he's towards the bottom of the order, but that can be productive in that lineup. I'm buying more and more in on Whit Merrifield this season. So we'll start with you, Adam, and then I'll give it to Kevin, who I know has a thought on this. What's your thoughts on Whit Merrifield? Because right now, the dude's got an ADP of 202.
Yeah, post 200, I'm in on Whit Merrifield now that we know that. See, my biggest concern here was who was going to make it out of camp that could kind of take the playing time specifically from Whit Merrifield. So I've been looking at and targeting Addison Barger, one of their top prospects. Was a shortstop prospect. He's moving around. They played him in the outfield a lot more during spring training. Got a really powerful bat from the left side. They have since sent him down along with a whole bunch of other prospects, or Elvis Martinez in the infield and others. And so honestly, with him being sent down, I'm a lot more confident about Whit Merrifield and even Santiago Espinal as well as second base. And I think that those are the only two guys that are going to be kind of fighting each other for any kind of playing time concerns. Whit Merrifield obviously has the benefit of being able to do both second base, outfield. In that outfield situation, even with, Varsho obviously is their everyday center fielder. Springer, as good as he is, he's another injury concern waiting to happen type of thing. On top of that, I'm trying to get as much Toronto lineup as I can. And with the new dimensions in that ballpark, the great Canadian small park, as it's going to probably be termed in short order. So we, I'm in on Merrifield at this point. And we get to a point in the draft where if I'm wrong, after 200, it's like you have no concerns dropping anybody you picked after 200.
Yeah, again, that's another great point. I'm a big fan. I think the steals are there, maybe a little pop, run scored. What about you, Kevin? Are you in on Merrifield at this point?
Yeah, I have him in a lot of places, and will at this spot, if I enter a couple more drafts before the season starts, he's a target, not just somebody I'm willing to take. It appears we're looking at 500 plus plate appearances, maybe not playing every day. In some leagues, at 5 outfielder leagues, there was leagues where that's why I was drafting him. As outfield started dropping off, I'm like, yeah, he's probably playing second base for Toronto, but that'll I can use him as an outfielder. Double-digit home runs. And last time, I think I'm expecting low double-digit home runs and roughly 20 stolen bases. That's what he's projected for, and I agree with the projections there. Last time I went into a season when I was projecting about 10 home runs and 20 stolen bases from Whit Merrifield, he went 10-40. Yep. That was 2021 when it looked like his speed had been dropping off. And with the rules changes, a guy like Whit Merrifield, who definitely knows how to steal bases, but maybe a half a step slower than he used to be, he could go from 20 to back to 40 in an instant.
Yep, I'm with you. I've been a big Whit fan. It's just about regular playing time. It looks like we're back. It's crazy how old he is, I'll be honest, but we'll run that one through. Last question I have for you guys with the Toronto Blue Jays here. Better fantasy target based on ADP. Kevin Gausman at ADP of 44.4. Alek Manoah at 68.5. Kevin, who you got here?
This is another one of those sometimes results matter more than we want to give him credit for, and I'll go with Manoah since I can get him 5th round as opposed to 3rd round. I know the metrics show maybe he was a little lucky last year, but results matter. And 2 rounds later, I'd rather have Manoah.
What about you, Adam? How are you looking at this one?
Just for the sake of being different, I'll go with Gausman here. For the exact opposite reasons that Kevin, you mentioned that Manoah, maybe he got a little lucky. Gausman was the opposite of that. He was probably the unluckiest pitcher in all of baseball, especially if you're looking at PLV and his hit luck. I think it was like a negative 35 added runs. He should have had 35 less hits last year than he actually put up. I'm okay with paying up for Gausman, but honestly, I've been, for the exact same reason I've been going after Toronto hitters. I've been avoiding Toronto pitchers pretty much as all off season.
Yeah, I'm team Kevin Gausman. That's where I'll be. But 20 pick differential to get to Manoah is interesting. I'll be honest. So I'll go Gausman, but both are very solid. Like you said, Kevin, it's hard to ignore the results. Like I get confused looking at Manoah's numbers, and it's just the results are there. So we'll see. All right, you guys have put up with me long enough. I have one listener question for you here. It comes from our boy at Torres Takes, and he says, "Will you guys be making any changes to your fab process this season? Whoever wants it can start with that."
Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. I don't know. My process, my process is probably just going to be a little bit more controlled. I'm probably going to be focusing more specifically on categories throughout the season rather than waiting until mid-season to kind of really be focusing on what I think I'm going to be needing rather than wait until I see what I actually do need. And so I'll be probably spending up a little bit more early to get the guys that are going to provide me with the statistics that I think I'm deficient in after my draft early on, and probably stream, even though I paid a little bit more up, especially my 12 teamers. I found myself last year at the end of the season with way too much money. So I will be paying up more earlier in 12 teamers than I am in 15 teamers, where I find myself spreading out my money a little bit better.
What about you, Kevin? How are you approaching your fab process this year?
I think no drastic changes. I say often I like to be conservatively aggressive. And what I mean by that is conservative in my bid amounts, but aggressive on looking ahead a couple of weeks at what maybe when I'm going to need a player. So I'm just going to continue to try to improve on that and continue to, I've gotten better and better each and every year, still not good enough at letting guys go. I brought up Ohapa earlier, and in years past, I wouldn't even consider letting him go at this point in the season. I'm going to be considering it in the first couple of weeks. So if he's not going to be on the roster, so that's what I'm trying to get better at and improve. Letting guys go is the big thing.
Yeah, that's one I know I need to be better at. I have a horrible time of just saying I need to drop guys. And that's a big one. Especially I play a lot of 12 teamers where you should be dropping guys a lot easier than in a 15. 15 is tricky. I get the trepidation in a 15. That's a rough road. But 12s you should be able to just kind of fling it away. But yeah, that and just kind of I don't know, simplifying my process. I don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but I need to, because when you start adding up how many fab leagues you have, it's a lot of time. So but the new NFBC process will help a ton. That's true. There's these cool tools at PitcherList.com. I heard that should help with that as well. So something to keep in mind also. So we'll wrap it up there. I appreciate you guys. Before we head on out, we'll start with Kevin, and then we'll go Adam. Let people know where they can find you and plug all your stuff.
Absolutely. I am at Hasting Kevin on the Twitter machine, and co-host with Adam on the Wire, or for the most part have been for the last couple of years. I am going to step back a bit, at least early in the season, more of a leave of absence than leaving. New job, wife's job being more demanding. I'm stepping back a little bit. Hopefully Adam will, when I'm available, allow me to come on as a guest, as we are doing for this first Fab show of the season. It's going to be great. Can't wait to do that for this weekend. But yeah, PitcherList.com. You guys have brought up PLV and all the new tools there. I'm using the new PLV Pro or PitcherList Pro for Keeper League draft. I have the new auction calculator software on the PitcherList site for Keeper League this weekend. Already got all my keepers entered. It works fantastic, as good or better than others I've used in the past. Looks amazing. So yep, and I'll still be in the Discord a lot over there at PitcherList as well.
Awesome. What about you, Adam? What do you got going on?
Yeah, just on the wire at On the Wire Pod every Sunday. Can continue to go strong. We'll have Kevin on this week, and we'll go from there. No word on anybody filling in those shoes. Those are pretty big shoes to fill, Kevin.
Very
so
big
I'm
shoes, yeah.
just saying.
Appreciate it.
I will give another plug to I don't write a whole bunch at PitcherList, but I did do a pretty decent article, I hope, on stolen base intent, kind of quantifying that and looking at different situations. So it was published a couple weeks ago. Check it out on PitcherList.com. I have a leaderboard on Tableau that hopefully will publish in short order to kind of be able to track that throughout. It has 4 years worth of data in it. And then it's going to be updated throughout the course of the 2023 season to kind of see how these new rules are affecting the trends that we're seeing as far as pop time and pitcher handedness and all the other factors that go into that. So hopefully that's useful, especially when it comes to trying to find stolen bases on a daily basis rather than even a long-term basis. So I shout out to that and take a look and let me know what you think of that.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome thing with all the stolen base landscapes changing. And yeah, looking forward on the wire, see what you guys got. I know you said, Kevin, you're stepping away for a little bit there, which is totally understandable. That is part of the real world we live in.
Sure.
So I get that 100%. And it'll be fun to hear you from time to time and see where that show goes, because Adam's a beast on the mic as well. So I appreciate you guys joining me again. If you aren't following them yet, follow Kevin on Twitter at Hasting. I screw this up all the time. Yeah, I had it right. At Hasting Kevin. I had it right the whole time. It's a long show. And they got Adam Howe at 80 Great on Twitter. Obviously, all their great stuff at PitcherList.com. And I'm on Twitter at BDentric. This was Benched with Bubba, episode 578. Doing some American League storylines. Catch you guys next time.